Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I am Stephen Means, and that is Andrew Gillis, as we continue with our State of the Program series, going position by position, having a conversation about where every single position group on Ohio State's team is heading into 2026 from both a micro and a macro standpoint. Today, we continue with our tight end group, the last of the offensive skill position groups. Once again, Keenan Bailey returns as the positions coach at tight end. And there's a lot of change in the top of that room. Obviously, last year, Max Clare and Will Kazmarek led that room. Both of those guys end up being day 2 NFL draft picks. And now the room is headlined by a fullback, an old guy, another Maction player, and a bunch of young guys outside of that. Gillis, Ohio State's home to the fullback. Or am I just being facetious at this point?
It's facetious at this point, I think. I don't think they're gonna run it back. They're certainly not running it back with Nate Roberts. If Nate Roberts is a fullback at any point this year,
He's catching the ball.
Yeah, like he's not gonna be back because he might be their best tight end like overall. And when you put him in the backfield, he is not your old school kind of, let's say, mid 2000s trestle ball tight end where it's like, hey, block and then run out into the flat and catch a pass. Like, no, like they're going to ask him to do a lot. So if you're putting him in the backfield, it's because you think he can, run an angle route. You think he can run out in the flat. You think he can hit the corner. Like you think he can do more than just one or two things. So I would be stunned if we see Nate Roberts. But I mean, look, what we saw, like if you would have told me last year before the Texas game, hey, Nate Roberts is going to be on the field, I'd be like, what? And then you'd be like, oh yeah, Nate Roberts is going to be on the field at fullback. I'm like, what? So I'm not going to leave open the idea that like Hunter Welsing takes that role, but it's not going to be Nate Roberts.
If Keenan Bailey's listening, he's writing that down. And they're going to put Nate Roberts at fullback first play against Ball State. As we've been doing all week, we have our categories, and we also have a big picture conversation that is directed towards each individual position. But let's start with maybe our 10-hole things here. Let's grade the overall state of the tight end room heading into 2026. And again, this encapsulates the current roster's performance, the development, the recruiting, and the trajectory it's headed on under Keenan Bailey.
Yeah, I'm at like a B- right now. I think the room is solid. When you lose a Max Clare and a Will Kazmarek in the same year, it's a great sign of development, which I think is a feather in Keenan Bailey's cap there. I think it's a good thing that you are able to go not only get a player like a Max Clare and say, this is what you're going to be at Ohio State. Like Max Clare was kind of exactly what we thought he was going to be. Will Kazmarek, I think, Will was a badass. Like, I think that's the only way to say it, right? Like Will was one of, if not the best blocking tight ends in the country. He went in the 3rd round and I think when we did our draft pod where we talked about, where each player we think is going to go. Yeah. I think I'm like the highest on everybody from Kazmarek, and I don't even think I had him in the right round because the Dolphins basically proved like, look, this is a dude that can block, and that's really important. So Ohio State had a great run, and I think this year might be a little bit of a reset, because you do have Mason Williams, the OU transfer. He is your quote unquote Kazmarek type. I think I don't. From what I understand about, the way that Keenan Bailey's talked to us about it and the way that kind of things have unfolded is you don't want to put people in a specific archetype, necessarily. You don't want to say like, we need a Kazmarek. Like,
with that being said,
yeah. But if here's the thing, if you could end up with 3 Brock Bowers,
but even then, Brock Bowers fits into an archetype. Max Clare had 43 catches last year. Will Kazmarek had 15. And but guess who played more? Will Kazmarek played more. Like this is not about like pigeonholing a guy. It's just that There's 11 jobs on the field at all times. What's your job versus what? If we dropped Brock Bowers in the last year's offense, he'd be Max Clare. He just would have gotten the ball more because he's better than Max Clare. But the concept of he's a receiving tight end who can block still applies. Just like Will Kazmarek is a blocking inline tight end who can also catch the ball a little bit if you need him to.
Yeah, so you're right. Like Williams is going to be that role. Wilson comes in as a veteran in the room. You have Bennett Christian as a veteran in the room. I wrote a story at the Cotton Bowl basically like about Nate Roberts, but like about the fullback usage. And I asked about what this can do for Nate, and Keenan was basically just like the exact quote. I don't have it in front of me. I should have pulled it up, but it was basically like, he's going to be the leader of the room moving forward. We're expecting him to carry the torch of the room moving forward. And that's pretty high praise for somebody who was just a freshman. So they have high praise for this kid. So a lot of veterans in the room. You like what you have in Nate Roberts. I think on the recruiting trail, you have Nick Lauder. Like, I think you like, or they just brought him in. I should say he's now a freshman. I think there's a lot of good. I don't know if there's like this dude's first or second round tight end. Like, I don't know if you're getting, I'm trying to think of old tight ends of yore, like a Michael Mayer. Like, I don't know, and I know this is hilarious considering where he's at in the NFL, but like Sam Laporta was like a second round pick. Like, I don't know if you have anybody that's going in that range of the NFL draft. So I'll say B- because I think you're in a good spot, but I don't know if there's anything elite about the 2026 room. I don't know if there's like a, there was, a Brock Williams commitment that, it basically came down to Texas threw him a bag of money and Ohio State said, no, thank you. So there's a lot here where I just think you have a lot of good, but I think there's another step or two to take.
So before I give my answer, because my answer is going to be in lockstep with the best room can and should conversation we're going to have, I'll start by having a conversation about Will Kazmarek, and that I think part of the reason we had them so low is because I just don't think we wrapped our heads around where tight end is right now in the NFL in terms of value. Because 15 catches doesn't scream day 2 draft pick. It just doesn't. But when you look at where football is right now, where 12 personnel, I don't want to say it's king, but it is becoming, it's at least a prince, right? It's at least Simba and Lion King, man. I just can't wait to be king. It's at least on the trajectory right now that teams are. Like, I think the 2010s, everybody just spread everything out. Let's have as many like wide receivers on the field and make you play in space. It does seem like football cyclical, and now we're going back here with it, and everybody's sort of playing in a bit of a box. And so because of that, I think Max Clare of 6 years ago, I'm looking it up right now. 6 years ago, Max Clare is Luke Farrell, who went 145th in the 5th round in 2021. To the Jacksonville Jaguars. But in 2026, Max Clare goes 61st. It goes 87th, Will Kazmarek, to the Miami Dolphins. I just think that is a sign of where football is right now. That exact same type of description, Will Kazmarek, if he's Luke Farrell in 2021, he's going in the mid 100s. But in today's football world, he gets to be a top 90 pick. And it's not about, is Will Kazmarek better than Luke Farrell? It's just that job description seems way more valuable in 2026 football world than it did in 2021 football world when Patrick Mahomes was still throwing 50 touchdown passes. And that's just not where we are right now. So I think that if this were happening this year, if Ohio State had 2 guys who fit the description and we were predicting the draft, I think we would have tight end 2 for Ohio State. If he was as good as Max Clare, I think we'd all be going, maybe he's like number 93 or something like that. So that's just the evolution of football. So I'm going to transition us to the next part to answer this question. I think this is an A+ room. But it's not an A+ room for the same reasons. Last year's room was an A+ room. Because again, some of this is what's your expectation for the group to begin with. I don't think every position group has to feel like every single year you should be the best in the country. I don't think that's the case.
I agree, yeah.
I think there's some groups are where the superstars are, and Keenan Bailey's even said this. Like, listen, we haven't always been the superstars of the offense. We've had to be the guys who, as you call Will Kazmarek, he's badass. Okay, somebody's got to be the badasses. Like the bad boy Pistons, everybody can't be Isaiah Thomas. Somebody's got to be somebody enforcing things, and for a long time, that's been the tight end room. And last year, they deviated so far from that I think it's easy to very quickly just react and go, oh, this is what tight ends here now are. The tight ends are going to get the ball 40 plus times a game. 40 plus times a season. Like, they're going to be a normal part. The tight end's going to get the ball more than the third wide receiver. It's like, this is just the world we're going to live in now, because Keenan Bailey has done just such a good job of recruiting, whether that be the portal or through high school, and developing that room since he took it over in 2023, that it can be very easy to see, okay, that's the peak of that. That's what it's always going to be. Now it's like, no. I think it's going to go back a little bit. And that doesn't mean they're not going to have a guy who's productive as a receiving tight end. It just means that if it takes a step back from their usage in the offense in terms of how often the ball's in their hands, that does not mean that the group can't be still at A+ level. It's just what that looks like is very different. Just like an A for an offensive tackle is very different than what an A would be at wide receiver. I think the same thing can be applied here, which is why, to our question of, is this the best the room can be and should be? I would say can be, no, because last year just happened. Yeah. You just had 2 day 2 draft picks, and they were playing 5 tight ends a game. The room was so good that they had a freshman that they had to force into a role just because it was like, he's got to play. And we can get into Nate Roberts a little bit later on, but like, they had 5 dudes. Mm-hmm. From a per capita basis, this was the deepest room on the roster last year. And how many conversations did we have last year about that? Like, what's actually the best room? They kept telling us for 14 games that their best room was their tight end room, and we just didn't want to listen to it for a long time there. So can be? No. Keenan Bailey has just shown us in 2025 how good this room can be in any given year. Should be? I think the answer is yes. You've got a top 150 recruit who got a healthy amount of snaps last year and seems ready to be tight end 1 for you. You've got a guy who's been in college long enough to get a doctorate. You've got a quality inline tight end in Mason Williams, who's taking the step up. Bennett Christian is heading into year 5 in the program. So he's been around for a little bit. Some decent depth, not great depth behind it, but decent depth behind it. I think this is what the Ohio State tight end room should baseline look like in any given year.
I'm going to echo a lot of that. I think what can be like, it's very hard to say, no, this is not what it can be, or it's yes, this is what it can be, when they just had to. Yeah. Dude, so it's like it's almost impossible to say that, because like, we came into the year thinking Max Claire's a draft pick, Will Kazmarek probably a late round draft pick, and I think Claire was probably about where we thought he was going to be, and Kazmarek was definitely the riser in that group, at least from where we kind of thought it was going to be. But I think when you go to should be, I think it's like, I don't know. I think there's another level, but I think you're like right there.
Yeah.
Like, I think you're not far away. And the only reason I would say that is just, I don't know what the upside of the room is right now. Like, I think Nate Roberts is going to be awesome, and maybe he's awesome against Ball State and Texas and Kent State. And then you're like, oh, well, Andrew's an idiot. I just, you're like, all right, second year tight end. This is an interesting development position. And, I was talking with Mark Pantoni, and I had this conversation with him of just like the portal versus high school recruiting. And he brought up the example of tight end. And he basically said tight end is an interesting world, because let's say, for argument's sake, you, dear Buckeye Talk viewer, listener, are a college GM, and you got to put together 700 puzzle pieces, which, by the way, every day they change form without you knowing, and you don't know what you really have to do. So you kind of have to put it all together all at once. And you're going, oh, God, what does this mean? Is it smart, considering the development idea of tight end, to invest? I'm picking a number out of random air. 750 grand in a 5-star tight end who's 6'7" and 225 pounds. If you're not certain he's gonna play for you in year 2, and Steven's already shaking his head, but that's the thing, and that's I think the interesting point, because we've brought this up on our own. I think we've brought this up on the pod. Chris Henry Jr. might be starting for this team by the time the leaves change colors, right? Like, he might be starting for this team pretty quickly. That's just his talent.
Mm-hmm.
If you brought in the Chris Henry equivalent of a tight end, I don't know if that's the case. And I don't know if that's the case on the offensive line. So there is an interesting kind of conversation about, like, what should success look like in this room? Is it always go get a high school guy and develop, like like they've been saying, and like we've kind of been saying, is just, you want to add in high school? Or is it go get Mason Williams and Will Kazmarek and Hunter Welsing types out of the program that are developed, that are older, that can come in and that are plug and play? And that's the interesting conversation with tight end, I think, in today's day and age. So I think there's, to get back to the original point, I think there's another like little level, just because there's a little uncertainty, and uncertainty scares me. But otherwise, you got veterans, you got the recruiting. I like this room. I do like this tight end room.
But it's why I gave it an A+, because I think this is a good formula for. I don't think you should be in the business of adding 5-star tight ends unless, like, I think because it's not. It's apples to oranges comparing a 5-star tight end to a 5-star wide receiver. Depending on what your room looks like, you could just drop a 5-star wide receiver into your room and go play football.
Yeah.
And that's not just Jeremiah Smith level. Like, Ryan Williams was an impact player as a freshman. DeCorian Moore, Cam Coleman. Like, it's becoming normal for freshman wide receivers who are highly rated to get to a campus, and if the room is shaped out a certain way, they can play.
Devin Sanchez was a rotational player at corner. Like, he still saw
playing. Correct. But with wide receiver, I'm not going to say it's easy. There's no such thing as an easy position. And I know sometimes when you call a position group easy, they can get a little fidgety about that. But wide receiver is one of the easier positions for a freshman player to make an impact as quickly as possible, because there's just a lot that you do as a high schooler that easily translates. It's like, okay, can you run routes? Do you understand spacing? Can you make a guy miss? Like 7-on-7, like Ryan Day has always said, he doesn't like 7-on-7 because it's not real football. But I do think wide receivers, there's at least some correlation to what real football is going to be. For the other positions, not so much. Like, but for wide receiver especially, because it's like, can you run routes and can you get open and can you catch the football? Let's start there, and we can like tweak it and like refine it and get the nuances about it later on. But, like, no one had to teach JJ to be 6'4", 225 and run a 4.3. Like, no one had to. That just existed for Jeremiah Smith. All the mental aspect and stuff, you can learn that while also playing football. That doesn't necessarily apply to tight end the same way. And so in your hypothetical, I think it's a really good hypothetical to bring up. It's also not completely off base of real life, but good hypothetical. If a 5-star tight end said that's what he wanted, I would sit them down in my office. This is if I'm a head coach and I'm running things, or if I was the GM, and I'd pull up Brock Bowers. Literally, I would pull up Brock Bowers and go, okay, do you think you're going to do this next year? Like, year one, like, are you immediately going to come in and be our best offensive weapon? And if they can't, and if we are having conversations and the reality is no, then I'm not paying that. I'm not paying that. But what I do think is reasonable is you go get Nate Roberts. Mm-hmm. You put him in an older room as a freshman. And so what you can do in that situation is Nate Roberts played 160 snaps last year. just enough to get his feet wet so he understands what he's doing. The pressure's not on Nate Roberts to be the best tight end in the room because Max Clare is here, where Krajisniki is here, Bennett Christian is here, Jelani Thurman is still here. So he gets to play just enough to get necessary experience, but also Ohio State gets to see whether or not the investment's going to be worth it. And 160 snaps later, they think the investment is worth it, and now he's your tight end one. And what did you do around him? You portaled. I like that. I do, because I do think this is one of the spots where you do need a healthy mixture. If you want a dude, you got to go recruit him. But I think you can fill the rest of the room and some of the other pieces that you want to do offensively in the portal every single year. I mean, hey, it looks like the Ohio Bobcats have no problem being your feeder school.
Yeah, at least at tight end.
Right. So I think, and also this is a reasonable thing to do every year. I don't think what they did last year is reasonable to do every single year at tight end. But I do think if we get to October 1st and we're going, hey, I know his production doesn't show it because Jeremiah Smith and Chris Henry Jr. and Brandon Ennis and Devin McEwen and Kyle Parker and Bo Jackson and Isaiah West and Legend Bay all exist. I know that, but like, I think Nate Roberts is one of the 5 best tight ends in the Big Ten. And we're like, yeah, like he's one of the 5 best. Is he closer to 5 than 1? Probably right now, but at least I can see it. And then around that is a bunch of old dudes who have done it before.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that. I think that's fine. On a year-to-year basis, that's fine, especially if you're also going to tell me that once every 4 years, the room is going to line up in a way that you get Max Clare, Will Kazmarek, Bennett Christian, Jelani Thurman, and Nate Roberts, and Keenan Bailey sitting with us in fall camp going, I got 5. I got 5 guys. Like we're having a down year at receiver because we're young and maybe not as deep as we used to be. So I got 5 guys ready to rock.
Sure.
I like this. I think this is what it should be every single year, while knowing that it can still. I think last year showed me the room can strive for more, but the floor is very consistent.
And I think to that point, I mean, it's kind of like, all right, 2 third-round picks. Would you rather that or like TJ Hawkinson? I'm just running through first round tight ends in my like that type of tight end. It's like, I don't know, how many is 2 third-round picks equal to 1 first-round pick? Where it's like, holy crap, this guy's the best tight end in college football. Like, I think I'm counting those as like almost like equal. Like
at Ohio State, specifically, right. Yeah. There are other schools where I think I would want the other thing, but at Ohio State, given what they do at some of the other skill positions here, I think 2 third-round picks can equal 1.
Yeah, it's like, all right, you have a first-round pick and then a dude who's a 7th-round pick, or a dude who gets an undrafted free agent camp invite, and like he's your kind of quote-unquote blocking tight end because this other dude is like, I almost said Kyle Pitts, but like I mean, I guess maybe, but like, somebody in that first round realm
excuse me. Could Keenan Bailey one day be Ohio State's play caller? And should he be?
I think he could be.
Okay.
I think Keenan Bailey is really smart. I think I was asking somebody else, like in the business, like, what do you know about Keenan Bailey? And they were like, not a ton, but I know he's a like up and comer. Like, I know like he's a name I'm gonna have to watch for in like a year. And they meant that as like offensive coordinator, the Brian Hartline track almost, right? Like where it's like, hey, maybe you have a year as an OC and then whatever. So yeah, I think he could be. I think, you start to kind of look at maybe where he's come from. He was an offensive intern for a few years at Ohio State. He went to quality control, special assistant to that coach, and became tight ends coach. Now he's the co-offensive coordinator. Like, seeing the progression, and Ohio State keeps giving him more, and they're not going to keep giving him more if he can't handle it. And I think they really like him. I think he's really smart. I think he could be an OC at Ohio State. It would not shock me if he's at like an OC somewhere else, because he gets a great offer somewhere else, because some other program says you're going to call plays specifically for us. You are the head ball coach on the offensive side of the ball. Like, you are not dealing with anything else. The should he be gets a little dicier, in my opinion, because you start to kind of I think there's two sides of the coin. There's one of Keenan Bailey where what is the tree that he's under? Okay,
Day.
Like it's Day, but like, who else has he's coached with? Chip Kelly, who's one of the better offensive minds in the last however many decades of college football. He's gonna coach with Arthur Smith, who was an NFL head coach, who came in. He's coached with Brian Hartline. He was here like
Kevin
when Ryan
Wilson
Day was like an OC. Like, he's seen a lot. Yeah. He's been here for a decade now. The path to getting different types of experiences and different types of voices, like, he feels what's the word I'm looking for? He feels like collateral in that regard, where it's like, hey, Ohio State's bringing in all these new voices. They have this NFL play caller as the offensive coordinator. They brought this head coach in from another Big Ten school. Well, Keenan Bailey's been here for that. So, like, Keenan Bailey is presuming he's taking in all of this information.
Yeah, there's this element to a lot of times coaches have to travel around the country to different jobs to get this level of, I guess, like, information. And it's like, I don't know, I just keep happening to go to work every day. And, as you mentioned, Arthur Smith, Brian Hartline, Chip Kelly, Kevin Wilson, Urban Meyer. Like, there's been enough offensive minds who have come through Ohio State since Keenan Bailey got here, I believe, in 2016, that it's like, I don't know. I didn't have to go to the information. The information just kept coming where I was. Exactly. So I think, let me ask it this way, because it feels like you want to say yes, but you don't, but you're not saying yes.
I want to say yes, but I also, like, who is Ryan Day to turn down an Arthur Smith every other year, or like a Matt Patricia Arthur Smith, or a Chip Kelly every other year? Like, that's a hard thing to turn down when it's like, hey, this dude's been doing it for a really long time in this position, which is obviously higher, or in the NFL, and that's why I'm less certain on should.
If the experience with Brian Hartline last year had gone better, would you be less hesitant to say he should be one day?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. That's a good question. Yeah, I think because if the experience with Brian Hartline had gone better, maybe he's the offensive coordinator now. But like that, I don't know. Maybe.
I think so. Back when Brian Hartline was first named offensive coordinator in 2023, Ryan Day essentially like backed off that spring. I don't think you were here yet, and like Brian Hartline was running things, and it was kind of like a trial run for both. Like, is Brian Hartline ready for this? Like, now he's got the opportunity to just completely run the offense, and also is Ryan Day ready to give it up? And the answer to both of those questions was probably not. Like, Day wasn't ready to give it up, but also maybe Brian Hartline wasn't fully ready for it. So Ryan Day held on it for one more year. And then when he was ready to give it up, clearly he didn't think Brian was ready yet, because he went and got Bill O'Brien. And then when Bill O'Brien left to go to Boston College, clearly he still didn't think Brian Hartline was ready, because he went and brought Chip Kelly in. There were two chances to give it to Brian Hartline in 2024, but he didn't do it. Now, was part of that because they were in a now or never type of season? Probably. But he still wasn't ready. So what did he do? He went and got Chip Kelly, and it was like one more year of Brian Hartline being able to absorb a lot of information. Like, I wonder if Brian knew that Chip was only going to be here for a year. Like, this was going to be a 1-year deal. Push all the chips in the middle of the table and let's go get it all. And like, that's what it was going to be.
I think that was the plan. I will say, I think that was the plan, because if memory serves, he took the Vegas job sort of late. Like, it wasn't like a thing where it was like, oh, well, I'm not going to answer questions about this at media day for the Cotton Bowl because I want to focus on this game and everybody knows you're gone. If memory serves, I think Chip had left a little later, but I think that was the plan when he got hired.
I don't know if it was the plan, but it was. I would assume it was definitely inferred of like, hey man, Maybe you're here for the next 10 years. Maybe you're here for 12 months. Whatever happens is, can you come do? You want to come do this for a year? You don't have to be the head coach anymore. You can just worry about scheming up ball. And then he gave it the Brian Hartline, which it wasn't bad. I don't think it was horrible. It just wasn't, hey, you should call players for the first time ever in your life at Ohio State. I think Keenan Bailey is a little different because some of this is how you wired. I think Brian Hartline is going to be a much better head coach than he was coordinator. I think the other way with Keenan Bailey, where Keenan Bailey might be this like supernova coordinator one day. I don't know about the head coaching part, but if you're telling him, hey, scheme ball, I think one day he has the potential to be elite. So I am almost wondering if Arthur Smith is a 1-year guy. No, Matt Patricia's back, so anything can happen. But what if Arthur Smith is here for a year and then an NFL job comes calling next January?
Yeah.
Does Ryan Day think that Keenan Bailey, across over a decade, has enough in his bag now that he has learned from a bunch of different people that it's like, you know what? I think you're ready for this, Keenan. Or did the Brian Hartline experience completely jade that? And so Day's just never going to have a guy who's never called plays ever again. And I think Keenan Bailey is an interesting case study with that because I actually think he'd be very good at that part of the job because of how he's mentally wired. Like, I think he's a schemer. He's a guy who doodles plays in his office. That's the type of guy he is. Like, not, you know what I mean? Like, not doodling like just like, oh, he's going to go this way. No, but like real.
No, well, I think like in any other sense of podcasting, if you say a dude's a schemer versus like on a football podcast versus any other walk of life.
Oh, yeah.
That's not a good thing.
For scheme is only a good word in sports world. Everywhere else,
Keenan
like,
Bailey's a schemer, but he's not a schemer. He's a schemer in a football sense.
Yeah, if you're talking in sports, then schemer is a good thing. If you're a schemer in any other aspect, that's not a good thing. But I think Keenan Bailey's a little bit more wired like Ryan Day is from a play calling, from a like just like offensive design, play calling, all those things, like talking ball standpoint. So I do wonder if Arthur Smith is gone in January. I'm not pushing anybody out the door, but if he is gone, what does Ryan Day do? Because Keenan Bailey's had the opportunity to leave for other jobs. And he keeps staying here. Man, now I want to ask Keenan Bailey a million questions about this. I think that's what I'm going to do.
I would love to ask Keenan Bailey a million questions about this that I know I'm going to get an answer to.
Like, I think he might answer them.
I think he'll say, like, he's had chances to leave, but I would love to know.
Well, I don't like where he was going to go. That's like not.
Well, no, I just mean like. I think that matters.
But I just mean, what does he think his realistic trajectory is in Columbus for a guy who has turned down opportunities to leave? If you keep turning down opportunities to leave, it's because you think there is a carrot at the end. Like, there's a like pot of gold at the end of the rainbow here. And so does I don't know, when you're 10 years in, do you start thinking like that? Do you, just like with Brian Hartline, of course, when you asked him back in 2019, he couldn't wrap his mind around the idea of being a head coach. But in 2026, he could wrap his mind around being a head coach. Has Keenan Bailey reached that point heading into his 10th or 11th, I can't remember, year at Ohio State? Is he wrapping his mind around the idea of like, I think I'm ready to run an offense. And I think I'm ready to do it here. But if not here, someone's going to let me do it. And is that the right fit for me? And so I think can be one day. I think he could be and should be. I think I would. I'm interested to see how Ryan Day feels about that if Arthur Smith is only here for 1 year. Okay. Let's get irrational. Something you're irrationally confident in when it comes to Ohio State's 2026 tight end room.
Something I am irrationally confident in. There's a couple of different answers because, like, if the last 2 words of this sentence didn't play out, I would have a different answer because there's a freshman tight end on this team who I'm very intrigued about, and his name is Nick Lauder. I really like the idea of Nick Lauder long term. I think that's something to keep an eye on. So just holster that one. something I'm irrationally confident in. I think Nate Roberts is going to whip butt. I think he's going to be awesome. Like I think we could get to the end of the year and look up and say, was Nate Roberts better than Max Clare? And maybe like you said, Steven, maybe the numbers aren't there to back it up because, like I think we saw last year with Ohio State's receiving core, you had the two superheroes in JJ and Carnell, and then you kind of struggled. Innis was there. I think people were not maybe as. I think people kind of thought there was going to be a little bit more with Innis than there was.
Yeah.
The depth, obviously, I mean, when you get to the end of the season and Mylan Graham is not cracking the lineup, a former 5-star, and Ryan Day is talking about consistency, and Quincy Porter's hurt, and David Adolph is the guy going into the game, like, that lends itself. Now, I'm not trying to take anything away from Max Clare. I think the NFL told us what they thought about Max Clare. But what I'm kind of curious about is if we get to the end of the year and we're like, man, you know what? Like, I understand that Max Clare, who I think I said earlier was a 3rd-round pick, he was a 2nd-round pick. If you get to the end of the year and you're like, all right, 43 catches, 400 and something yards, okay, like he was your kind of over the middle threat.
Yeah.
Maybe Nate doesn't do that, but maybe he's at like 35 and 390 and 2 touchdowns. And like, I don't know. Stats lie, but they also don't. And I'm wondering if this is one of those situations where you almost weight it a little differently. And we look at Nate going like, man, that dude is really, really good. And he might already look better than, what Max Clare had. And maybe that was one of the reasons why Max Clare left, because, Ohio State knew what they had.
So mine for 2026, since we have to do it specifically for 2026, is less about touches, though I do think a year from now it might be. Like, I don't know, could we live in a world where in 2027 Ohio State's offense is Chris Henry Jr., Nate Roberts, and then like either Brock Boyd or Creighton Gilford in terms from a passing aspect, maybe. I'm just looking at the snap distribution, and I think 2024 it's hard because Will Kazmarek missed 4 games with an injury at a pivotal point. So G. Scott ended up playing 548 snaps. Will Kazmarek played 298. And Bennett Christian played 234. So that's 3 guys over 200. And I am very much curious if Will Kazmarek would have been closer to 450 had he not gotten hurt. In fact, like what he and G. Scott's snap count have mirrored each other a little bit more had he not gotten hurt. Because last year, Will Kazmarek played 509 snaps in 14 games, and Max Clare played 488 snaps in 14 games. And Will Kazmarek played 509, while they also had like a 2-game stretch against UCLA and Rutgers where they said, hey, Will, you're going to play like 12 snaps, and then we're going to give you the day off because we're about to ramp up your snap count as soon as we get on the field with Michigan. So he was, by touches standpoint, sure, Max Clare was tight end 1. But if we're going to go by who was playing more football, Will Kazmarek was 2 years. It was tight end 1. But even then, Bennett Christian was at 255, Nate Roberts at 160, and John Thurman at 135. But you had 2 guys who like essentially played the same amount of snaps, plus another guy played more than 250. In 2023, their tight end 1, Stover, whose first name is escaping me for some reason.
Cade.
I keep wanting to say Garrett. Again, that's because Garrett's still on the roster. Yeah. Cade Stover played 615 snaps. That was 262 more snaps than any other tight end on the roster. The next tight end played 353. In 2022, Cade Stover played 709 snaps, while the next highest tight end played 285 snaps. So it's 424 more snaps. Like this, and that goes back to emphasizing the way that Keenan Bailey has built depth in the room. We went from a world where tight end 1 was playing 700 snaps and almost 430 more snaps than anybody else to, hey, there's multiple guys playing over 400 snaps in a season. I think we go back a little bit this year too, and it's what I'm irrationally confident in because it's a two-way thing. It's one, the room isn't as deep as last year in terms of they don't have multiple guys who are day 2 draft picks on the roster right now, but also I think Nate Roberts might be that good that he's not coming off the field like at all for anybody. Like if there's a tight end on the field, if there's at least one tight end on the field, Nate Roberts is on the field. If there's 0 tight ends on the field, Nate Roberts is not playing for Ohio State anymore. And I don't mean because he's in the portal, I just mean he's probably hurt. I am like irrationally confident that there might be like a 300 snap difference between Nate Roberts and anybody else on this team because he's that much better than everybody else. And again, it's why those 160 snaps were so important. Of the freshmen who played and had like decent roles or at any level of playing time, the only person who snaps last year rival Nate Roberts in terms of how important they were, even if they weren't a lot, are Devin Sanchez's. Mm-hmm. Because both of those guys are very quickly going from, hey, we're going to give you a little bit so you can learn behind a deep room, to, hey, you ready to be a playmaker for us? And so I don't think Nate Roberts is coming off the field. And I think it was very notable that every time we got to see practice in the spring, he was with the ones. And I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to see the first 3 practices of fall camp. I'm pretty sure he's going to be with the ones every single practice.
I think Keenan said, like, he's earned that right. Like, I think Keenan said, like, he's been the guy who has, like, and it's like, all right, when you're saying that about a dude, like you said, there's a dude in Hunter Welsing who could have a doctorate at this point, and Mason Williams, I know they're transfers, but, like, 7th and a 5th-year player, and then Bennett Christian's a 5th-year player. And then you get to the end of the line and you're like, oh, by the way, they're talking this way about the 2nd-year guy? Yeah, he's going to play a lot.
I'm going to give you a weird list.
Oh, boy.
What do Jeremiah Smith,
oh, my God,
Nate Roberts, and Julian Sand all have in common?
They play for Ohio State football.
They're also the only players on this team who are, bar none, no questions asked, the best player at their position group. Like everybody else, we can make a conversation. Like Kenyatta, he's probably right now, but also, I don't know, what if Zion Grady goes crazy this year? What if Epi Santanale goes crazy this year? What if Bo Atkinson goes crazy? What if Quay Russaw goes crazy this year? Execution, you have a case, but also John Walker. What if James Smith goes crazy this year? Okay, Peyton Pierce, right now, the way that James Laurinaitis is talking, is probably the best linebacker and the leader of that room. But what if Riley Pettijohn goes crazy? What if TJ Offer goes crazy? What if Christian Allegro goes crazy? Listen, this is like the most pro Devin Sanchez podcast there is out there. But what if Dominic Kelly goes crazy? What if Jermaine Matthews, what we saw at the end of last year was just a hiccup, and he's like awesome this year? Jalen McClain, probably the best safety right now. I think he might be a star this year. But what if Earl Little is awesome? What if Terry Moore is awesome? What if Leroy? Everybody else, there's at least a guy that you can push to the table where we can have a conversation. Yeah. You can't have a conversation about wide receiver. You can't have a conversation about quarterback. Even at running back. Like, what if Isaiah West is better this year? You can't have a conversation at QB, wide receiver, and tight end.
The quote that I mentioned earlier that I can pull up now, and I think maybe this is a good way to end it. This is from Keenan Bailey talking to me late December 2025. Mm-hmm. Quote, "The sky's the limit. I'm going to lean on Nate to be the future of the tight end room. I don't make any bones about that. When I was recruiting him out of Norman, the plan was always come in, earn a role. He's done it. But going forward, he needs to hold the banner of this tight end room."
Does that not sound a lot like what Tim Walt was saying about Devin Sanchez in the spring?
Sounds a lot like, you better be good, kid.
Because I'm riding on it. Yeah. So, yeah. And that's what Nate Roberts, Julian Sand, and Jeremiah Smith all have in common. They are the only guys on this team where there is like no question about who the best player is right now. Something you're irrationally fearful of with this group in 2026?
That the floor is not as high as we think. Because I think we're like, and again, this is so funny to do this sometimes, like to force yourself to talk negatively about something, because it's like, I don't know, we did just talk about Nate Roberts. Like, I think this dude's gonna be friggin' awesome.
Sure.
But I also want to leave open the possibility, and I think that's fair, and I think our listeners and viewers get that it's like, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes it rains, and something's gonna happen. Like, not, I'll put it like this: not every best case scenario on Ohio State football team is gonna work out.
Of course not.
And I think with Nate, the ceiling might be there, but you worry, like, okay, he's needs to develop a little bit more as a blocker. And like, there's things where individually you can explain it away. All right, he needs to develop as a blocker. But yeah, he's a second year player, and that's totally fine. And hey, Mason Williams is coming in, but he's making the leap from OU up. He needs a little bit more time. All right, yeah, I get that. Josh Simmons was a first round pick, and he looked like poo for like 5 games because he really just, it looked like the game was going too fast for him. Sometimes that is the case. And like, look, I think Mason Williams has a high bar to beat Will Kazmarek.
Yeah.
But like, maybe it takes a little bit, and the speed of the game is more difficult. Hunter Welsing, I think he's fine, but like, I think Hunter Welsing is what he is at this point. Like, I don't think we're going to look at Hunter Welsing and be like, well, he's going to transform the room. Bennett Christian, I think, is solid. I think he's fine, but I don't think you want to necessarily be relying on Bennett Christian in a way of like, he's our number 1 tight end, because that means something went wrong with Nate Roberts, I think, and probably Mason Williams even. So the thing that I would worry about is just like, individually you explain it away, like, Welsing, you knew he was a depth guy coming in. And Bennett Christian, well, he was never supposed to be the number 1 guy. And Nate Roberts, there's still some things he's got to clean up because he's a freshman or a second year player, and he's getting better. And last year he really didn't play a lot of tight end because he was doing a hybrid role, and he only played in garbage time and blah blah blah. And Mason, like, individually you can explain those things away, but I think the thing that I would worry about is like collectively, not that each of those guys hit their worst case. It's just the floor is not as high as we are anticipating. And then all of a sudden it's like, it's spotty, and you are relying on certain positions and certain players of just like, can we get through a game this way? And I don't think you want to look at any of your positions and go, can we get through a game, or can we get through this couple of weeks here?
No, that's fair. I mean, we did spend a large portion of this podcast talking about which one would you rather have, like the room that's got 2 day 2 picks, or a room that might have a guy who's a day 1 draft pick. And like, this room might be the latter, depending on how good Nate Roberts is. And it's like, okay, but that means there's like not a lot else outside of him if he's not what he needs to be. I have 2. Ohio State lost a lot of transfers this offseason, like more than I think we're accustomed to. They also brought in more than we're accustomed to. And I think it has me interested in how some of these guys plan out at other spots more than in years past. And that doesn't mean that everybody who leaves Ohio State is going to turn into Jameson Williams at Alabama or Joe Burrow at LSU. But that doesn't mean you can't be a good football player just because you didn't work out at Ohio State. Now, there's going to be a lot of these guys who don't work out, but Jelani Thurman is just interesting to me still, of like, what if another team's able to tap into something that Ohio State just wasn't, and it just didn't click here for whatever reason. And now, for whatever reason under the sun, Bill Belichick gets Jelani Thurman playing at an all ACC level. And it's like, man, you could have had Jelani and Nate Roberts this year. It's irrational, because I don't think that's how this is going to go, because Jelani's also entering, was this year 3 for him, or year 2? No, yeah, year 3 for him.
No, I think it's 4, because he played in the Penn State game. Remember, he had the no, yes, no, yes catch.
Was he here in 23?
I think he was 23. I'm looking this up now. I believe I'm fairly certain he was 23, because I don't really remember covering his recruitment.
No, he is 23. You're right, because he's a year older than Aaron Nolan, and they went to the same school.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, that's a yes.
So yeah, I mean, it's year 4. So
he's
like
in the class with Ennis and Tate, and
so it's not like I'm not saying he's going to turn into a superstar tight end at North Carolina, but it's more about, man, like, could we be looking at him at North Carolina and be going, man, what if you had that as like your tight end two alongside Nate Roberts, and like you could run back some Max Clare, Will Kazmarek stuff? That would have been cool, because he still is like a freakish athlete. So
to your point about that, I think that is the thing that we get so intrigued about on this Ohio State beat, because it's like, you don't want to say greatness is boring, but like every football coach and every basketball coach, every coach in America will tell you greatness is boring because it's disciplined and blah blah blah. But the thing that I think we get so excited about, and I'm trying to remember, like, you know, sometimes it doesn't work out, but like the thing that we get so excited about are different body types.
Yeah.
Like, we're all excited about Legend Bay because of the way they're talking about him, because of the way they were doing. But even before he got here, everyone went, ooh, Curtis Samuel type, you say? Keep going. Everybody was intrigued by that. And like, what has this room not had? That 6'7", holy crap, look at that guy. And you like look at him when he walks into the room and you have to look up at the ceiling. Like, you just haven't had that type. And I think everybody was intrigued by that. I think it goes both ways. I think everybody was intrigued by that, and it didn't really work at Ohio State. I think everybody was intrigued by CJ Hicks, and it didn't really work at Ohio State. And I think everybody was intrigued by Arvell Reese, and he turned into a first-round pick.
It's just Jelani's like physical makeup, and then like his athletic pedigree. Like his mother's a former WNBA player. It's new, but it's also there are some players when you look at them, you go, if that works out, it's gonna hit. It's gonna hit hard. And unfortunately, sometimes it does hit, and sometimes it does not hit. But those are the chances.
Ethan Anyama versus DeJuan Jones. That's the example, I think. Sometimes you look at both those dudes and you go, if it hits, it hits. And one of them it didn't, and one of them it really did.
But I think this is also the first year where there's like multiple options of people where Ohio State fans could at least be like, man, what if that was happening? I wish that could have happened here. Even if you're not upset that it's not happening here, it's like, man, I picked that one specifically because that doesn't feel like it's going to be a level where he's not going to win he's not going to be the best tight end in the country this year, right? What's the name of that award? I'm having a rough day remembering the names of things.
The Mackey Award.
Yeah, he's probably not going to win the Mackey Award this year, but I think there is a level below. You're the best player in the sport at this, the way that Jamison Williams and Joe Burrow were, where it's just like, no, you're a quality level football player who's finally ready to be productive. Unfortunately, it isn't at Ohio State. You had to go somewhere else to do it. In a world where could Ohio State fans be looking at him if they're randomly watching an ACC game one day and going, man, what if he was our second tight end alongside Nate Roberts? That's my first one. My other one is on behalf of the entire fan base. I get why they did what they did last year. Didn't always like it.
Oh.
And I'm sure most people didn't like it. But I understood it because you look up and you go, the tight end room is better than the wide receiver room right now. We have two monsters at wide receiver and then question marks. While at tight end, we have 2 day 2 draft picks and 3 other guys who are good enough to play at Ohio State. And I think because Carnell and JJ dealt with some of the injuries they dealt with in November, that got validated on the actual football field when they weren't there and the wide receivers still didn't get the ball. I don't think this room is set up to do that again this year. So my irrational fear is twofold. One, they think they can do that this year. Because they're going to lose more than 2 postseason games if they think they can do that this year. The other side of that coin is what last year was. Last year they could do it, but they also had to do it. My irrational fear is that they think they can do it, but they also think they have no choice but to do it. Because that means they were wrong on some portal evaluations for wide receiver play. So, on behalf of the entire Ohio State fan base, that is my irrational fear.
I actually do like that take because it's not just a tight end take.
Yes.
It's, if you have to rely on your tight ends again. I mean, I guess to play devil's advocate, I guess there is like a scenario where you're like, Nate Roberts looks like he's going to win the Mackey in a year or two, and then Mason Williams is just Will Kazmarek reincarnated.
But that's different.
Christian Hunter Welsinger here.
That's different. Getting like the realization of, our tight end room is actually baller. Yes. We're rocking is very different than we have to play a lot of tight ends because our receivers aren't that good.
Exactly. And it's not, like you said, it's not only that, it's that it's like Quincy Porter got hurt. And like, I brought this up on a previous pod, like, what does this receiver room look like if Quincy Porter's healthy? Because like, maybe Quincy Porter just shows up and they're like, hey, you're in, and he starts playing a lot and they see more and they're like, hey, we're willing to hang on.
And that's the problem. That's the problem with last year.
And then you get to the point, and it's like, all right, well, now he's gone. So what did they have to do? They went out and got Kyle Parker. They went out and got Devin McEwen. And if they are having to rely on their tight ends that much, it probably means, again, that the portal class that you just dipped your toe into for the first time ever, it didn't look good.
And that's the problem with last year. They could do it because the room was baller. They also had no choice but to do it because that's what the team was last year. They were not good at wide receiver outside of Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. Now, that's a high bar. Like, man, you're not as good. You're not that good outside of the number 4 pick in the NFL draft and another guy who's probably going to be the first non-quarterback in an NFL draft. But like, they weren't there for a game and a half, and Ohio State didn't know who to turn to at wide receiver. They can't be in that. You can have the former. You can have our tight end room as baller, but you cannot have that be paired with we have no choice but to rely on our tight end room because more than likely this tight end room isn't going to be as baller as last year's was. So this wide receiver room better be up to snuff, because if not, get used to seeing 4 tight ends on the field again at the 17-yard line. And they're going to lose more than 2 games if they're having to do that. So that's my irrational fear. And of course, as we've been saying all week, we're somewhere in the middle with both of these things when talking about these position groups. This is why we said irrational and not rational with these things. 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. Ohio State tight end room heading into the 2026 season. We'll have the offensive line with Gillis and I tomorrow, and then next week we will start the defense. In the meantime, for Andrew Gillis, I'm Stephen Means. Talk to you guys later.